Hello, my name is Gene Monterastelli, and I am the editor of TappingQA.com. And the video that you are about to watch is an interview that I did as part of the 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping was a free event, which was a fundraiser for the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network provides training and trauma relief tools to those in war-torn countries, as well as working with refugees all over the world. They've been able to help out over 200,000 people all over the world. After you watch this video, if you find this video something that was useful, the very easy way that you can say thank you to the guest for giving their time and sharing their expertise is to go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support and make a small contribution to support the Peaceful Heart Network. Again, that is 24hoursoftapping.com/support, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Dr. Peta Stapleton is a registered clinical health psychologist and an associate professor at Bond University in Australia who embraces evidence-based and innovative techniques. Peta is a world-leading researcher in EFT tapping and led the world's first study in investigating brain changes after EFT. She was awarded the Harvey Baker Research Award for meticulous research and was named the 2019 Psychologist of the Year in Australia. Peta has authored The Science Behind Tapping, which won the Best Self-Help Book at the American Book Fair 2019. If you do not own The Science of Tapping, what are you doing with your life? You should be owning that right now. It is a fabulous book. Not only is there great information in there, but it makes us more fluent as we talk about tapping with other people. Please welcome to the virtual stage, Peta Stapleton. Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend, Gene. It's lovely to talk to you on a Sunday morning from...
Well, it's Saturday evening here. The good news is for everybody who is joining us, we are only 30% into the goodness of this 24 hours. And I am so happy that you're here having a conversation with us today. And I was doubly excited when you sent the note in saying that you wanted to talk about the research and the stuff that you guys have been finding. Like lots of people originally got connected with EFT through Gary's newsletter with people just writing their own personal experiences. My first website was built off of me writing my own personal experiences. But for us to be in a circumstance where we actually have real evidence-based scientific stuff, so it's not just woo crap, but we can actually say, see what we know, that is so awesome. So just the fact that you exist in the world and you're doing all of the work that you do, you and Dr. Feinstein just make my life so much easier. I want you to know, because you allow me to explain this in easy ways.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you.
Awesome.
Pleasure. Pleasure.
So talk to me a little bit about the study and how it was structured and the way things go. Because again, I think it's okay if we get a little bit into the minutia here, because as a tapping fluent audience, I think it's really important that we can talk about this stuff clearly. So I'd love to hear about what you guys have been doing and what you've learned in the process.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we had obviously come out of probably a dozen years in the tapping research space for food cravings and weight loss. And most people know that's where we did the first MRI. We kind of held a bit of a personal, I guess, goal to come into the chronic pain space. There'd been a few studies done. Nick Ortner had published one. Dawson had looked at a couple of different pain outcomes in other studies. But on the back of, in the US as well as here in Australia, opiate regulation and things like that occurring a couple of years ago. So we designed this fantastic study in 2019, had it all approved. We had two different arms, self-paced version versus obviously log on live, be led. And then, of course, the world shut down and we were oh, no. Oh no, what do we do now? So we quickly pivoted to the online space. So the self-paced version was being delivered like that anyway. But then we were able to still deliver the live sessions live online via Zoom. And of course, that did open it up to many other people that could join from around the world, which was really great. So we're currently in the last tiny leg of 12-month follow-up. So that whole trial is finished. It was a 6-week program, 2 hours a week, so 12 hours of tapping, but a small subset of the live group that lived locally close to me were able to have their fMRI, functional MRI, measured before the 6 weeks, at the end of the 6 weeks, and in conjunction with that, were able to come into my office and we measured for the very first time ever vagal nerve activity and efficiency with Dr. Stephen Porges' team. So they sent us out a whole bunch of these little heart rate variability monitors where we can measure and take that activity and they convert that to vagal tone efficiency. So for the second time in the world, we've been able to look at brain scan differences. And of course, the wider trial had about 200 people that have completed that. So I'm thrilled to actually share some of this. Yeah.
Excellent. And before we jump into the details of it, for those of us who are not scientists and do not have access to a $1 million machine, what actually is a functional MRI and what are you measuring when you stick someone inside of that?
Absolutely. So functional MRI measures blood flow to certain regions of the brain.
Okay.
And then that shows up as, so oxygen goes to that area of the brain. It shows up as a signal and we're able to then see that signal. Now, when we measured our food craving patients, we were able to have them look at images of high calorie foods. And of course, the brain activates and then we can see a difference over time. Now, pain's a little bit different in that we didn't want to induce pain or pressure when they were in there because
you weren't going to put them in there and just start sticking needles into their body to see what happened.
Normally you put a peg on their toe, but even that's more like pain invades the brain areas very differently depending on type of pain. But what does happen is different areas of the brain, when there's a change in pain experience, will show that. So what we did was take a resting state pain picture, if you like. Okay. So they just lay in there for about 10, 11 minutes and didn't have to do anything. They just rested. We were able to take every single one of those baseline scans and see a difference based on tapping and to see whether areas of the brain where the pain map had invaded had actually come back to look more like a typical pain patient, which there's a certain area of the brain that modulates pain and catastrophizes pain. And so we wanted to see, did that resting state change so that, they obviously got that subjective experience in their day-to-day life. So, very exciting.
And so what were you... I know that you don't just do an experiment, you do an experiment with expectations inside of that. So what was, in a perfect world, what was the thing that you were hoping for at the beginning that you would see when you were looking at people's brain?
So we absolutely knew that a certain area of the brain that in a typical patient, say you and I, we don't have chronic pain, would actually just show a tiny little bit of activation. It's just normal. If you were to knock your toe or something like that, you'd get a response. That should modulate and catastrophize, like that catastrophizing. We should be able to kind of bring that back in. It's like a gear stick, if you like, pretty quickly. So in an ultimate world, we were absolutely hoping that would happen over a 6-week, 12-hour tapping program for our pain patients, that their brain would, but I had no idea if that would happen. So certainly sometimes if you were to look at me in my office at Bond University, you'd see me going like this. I don't know if this is actually going to work and what if it doesn't work? So perfect world. That's what we hope for.
Well, and this is the important thing that it's for us to recognize about experiments. If it didn't work, that's a valid response. It's just giving us information, which means that we now have to investigate and try something else. It's disheartening when we have something we want to work and it doesn't. But I think that's one of the reasons that I appreciate the work that you're doing so much is you're going where the data leads you to see what is going on. You're not just saying, oh, it worked a couple times, therefore we say it works. And as frustrating as I'm sure it would be to have results that you're not the ones you want, that's why you do what you do, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And we did get one of those outcomes. So I'll just talk about the vagal nerve activity for a minute. Stephen's team had kind of been hypothesizing that perhaps, this relationship between, adverse childhood experiences, things like anxiety, depression, and then vagal efficiency was related. But they wondered whether somatic-based approaches such as EFT would impact that relationship. Now, in our study, we measured adverse childhood experiences. And I can tell you across 200 people, we expected that we would see high ACE scores because of the amount of chronic pain. Like our average chronic pain suffering was about 15 years. So these people had had it for a long time. Now, our average ACE score was only 3 out of 10, which is actually pretty low. So we did not find the outcome in the ACE scores across 200 patients that we thought and what the research predicted out there normally. So it's an interesting kind of story to tell. And of course, we do that in the papers that we write. But maybe pain can exist outside childhood trauma. So there's an example of something that you kind of think you're going to find, but you don't. And you're like, okay, well, we'll explore it again. Let's see what happens. But maybe it's a different story.
And so you said ACE score. What was that? What is that? What is that? That is not a phrase that I know.
Yeah. So adverse childhood experiences have been researched in the space of childhood trauma, and it's boiled down to about 10 different significant events that occur to a child before the age of 18. We absolutely know there's a prediction between high ACE scores, typically over the number 4 in childhood, are correlated with chronic health issues later in adulthood, and pain has been suggested to be one of those. So, but funnily enough, we actually didn't find a very high relationship there.
Yeah. Okay. So before we start talking about results and the things you learned, what were you actually having people tap on in the 12 hours where they were working with someone, or the however long the self-paced thing looked like? What did the actual tapping look like to deal with the chronic pain?
Yeah, so we devised in 2019, just based on what we knew out there in the research. We'd done a very small pilot study some years earlier, so we had some ideas. The first thing pain patients want with tapping, and particularly to embrace tapping, is to tap on their pain intensity. So we always start there. So we always start with, rated out of 10. We give it really creative descriptors. What color is it? What temperature is it? Does it move around the body? Some of those things. And we teach them first up so that they at least walk away with an experience of, hey, I can actually take the edge off in my day-to-day activity. So we go there, we talk about that. We also talk about the relationship to emotions and feelings. So, have they ever noticed that a certain feeling state might intensify their pain? So we start to develop that insight. And then we teach them different things like how to actually apply it to sleep. So insomnia is a real problem in the pain space because pain can wake people up. So we show them how to use it discreetly for sleep, those types of things, as well as goal setting for the future. So we develop almost a future identity of being a pain-free person, chronic pain-free person. What does that look like? Secondary gain that might pop up. Now, funnily enough, we talk about secondary gain from a therapy point of view, but the way we framed it, which landed really well in our program, was to call it when pain is protective for you. So we came from that angle. We didn't introduce that idea till session 4, so that they were well and truly tapping by then, and sort of said, look, if pain was protecting you from other things in life, what might those be? And then we were able to peel some of those layers of the onion, perhaps, with committing to go back to work, responsibilities in life, relinquishing perhaps, pensions that they were being paid because of their pain, whole range of things. So that was sort of the picture, if you like. And I know one of the things we might talk about is a significant particular feeling, emotional state that really was important in the pain space. So do you want me to go there?
I have it in my notes. We're definitely going to talk about it. If you want to do that now, if you want to do it later, wherever it makes sense for us to talk about that, it's great.
Yeah, maybe I'll unpack it now, just because if anyone's listening in and perhaps wants to do it on themselves, or even with clients you see yourself, one of the main feelings that stands out in the chronic pain area is the emotion of anger. Now, there's a really interesting conundrum with anger, and most chronic pain patients will put their hand up and say, I absolutely have intense anger. Now, that could be towards what happened to them to create the pain. It could be towards a body area. So if the shoulder is the source of pain, they feel angry towards that body area. But the thing about anger in chronic pain is anger as an emotion has a neurotransmitter that's released. So every time we're in an angry state, for whatever reason, and that neurotransmitter, norepinephrine, actually has an analgesic effect. So when you're in an intense state of anger and you have chronic pain, it dulls the pain. Wow. So you should have seen the light bulbs going off in the groups and the self-paced and the amount of comments we were getting, because the moment you start to tap on, I feel angry towards that body area, that norepinephrine will decrease, which also means the analgesic effect does, and the pain severity
goes back up.
Yeah. So we highlighted it. We made sure they knew what was going to happen. Of course, the answer is persevere, keep tapping, you'll get a collapse. all of those. But such a fascinating thing that kind of exists out there anyway. But the minute you bring it into this space, they absolutely needed to know about this analgesic effect of the neurotransmitter that goes with anger. You can imagine if you need to get fired up to, get something done, that can work really well for you, but it doesn't work well if you're targeting that in your pain.
And one of the things that I do a lot in my work when I'm working with my clients is talking about what is the information of the emotion. The information of sadness and grief is I'm disconnected from something important. Frustration is I'm not having my needs met. Anger is the perceived sense of attack. And I taught anger management for 2.5 years in a county jail. And a number of my guys were literally, and I'm not using that in the millennial sense of the word, I'm using it in the definition of the word, they literally were alive because their anger helped them to fight their way out of it. And if we're in a circumstance where we're fighting for our life, it makes sense that we have something that has an analgesic effect going on inside of the body, because if I'm fighting my way out, I don't want to be going, ow, 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 ow. I want to be fighting my way out. So that makes a lot of sense that is what is going on.
That's right. There you go. So if anything out of this talk, I hope that people kind of remember that one and kind of go, oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating thing. Okay, so I want to know a little bit more about kind of the process and the modality and what that looked like before we kind of dive in and look at it in the other direct, like look at the results. So the people who were... And I guess this is something I think it's important to say for folks who aren't used to doing research, is that when I am tapping with a client, I have permission to freelance and bring in other techniques and do like all sorts of different things to just solve the problem. Because when I'm working with a client, my job is to help them to solve the problem. When you are doing research, or my understanding from the research that you've done in the past is you have so much less latitude to be able to do that sort of thing, because we have to do it in a way that can be peer reviewed and can be repeated. And so therefore we need to be doing something that is uniform, which is good for research, is bad if you're just trying to get someone out of pain, or it's less flexible. Bad's the wrong word. It is less flexible when you're doing that. So what did the self-pacing process look like? What did the 12 hours when they were working with someone look like? How are they similar? How are they different?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. We're really restricted in research, literally to the point of our exclusion criteria for this particular trial was so lengthy. We couldn't include cancer pain or other kind of types of pain, nerve pain and things. And that is all because of the publication process. The self-paced version was identical. So as far as the topic areas, they were video instructed, and they were videos of myself. They were drip fed those videos over the 6-week period. So someone couldn't jump in and go, I'm going to do the whole 6-week program in 1 week.
Gotcha.
So of course, had to pace that out. They did have access to a live community where I was present. So if they wanted to ask a question throughout their program or have something clarified, they could, and everyone could see the answer. That works really well. And we've found that's the key, I think, in self-paced programs that show tapping works just as well. And our results have shown self-paced version, identical outcomes to the live version. So I can tell you that heads up right from now that they got the same outcomes, which is brilliant for people that perhaps, maybe cost effectiveness, time, that kind of thing can just self-pace through. But having that live version, I think, worked really well. The other groups logged on live, same topic area, but what they had the advantage of, if you like, was a little bit of teaching instruction, probably about 20 to 30 minutes. Then they would go into their breakout rooms with an emotional assistant, so an EFT practitioner.
Gotcha.
And they would do personal tapping work on whatever was related, at that time to the topic. So they got kind of a really good hour every single week doing very personal tapping. And of course, the self-paced version were doing their own personal tapping based on the topic as well. So they were identically matched. It was a randomized controlled trial, so people didn't get a choice. The computer does that for us. And every arm of both of those conditions had a wait list group. So we made sure that waiting doesn't do anything, or the anticipation of your therapy starting doesn't do anything to change your pain. And I can tell you it doesn't. So we always have that kind of wait list. They then get the option of the group afterwards. So so it was a really well-designed program. We just had the conundrum there that popped up at 2020 of going, we have to go online for everything. But
that's right. That small thing that happened 2 years ago, whatever that was, I can vaguely remember what it was.
That's right. Yes. So there you go. It was, it's
Great.
worked really well. So 6 and 12-month follow-up is just finishing up now.
And so then, if you're willing to share, I don't know what's proprietary and what's not. What were the topic areas that you tapped on, and what were the topic areas? How did you come up with them, and how did you decide the order to put them in?
Yeah, so it was probably informed a little bit by a study we'd done in 2017. So it was with a local pain group here. We were able to go in and just run a 4-hour intensive. But part of that was we did a qualitative study where we asked people around the world just answer our questions, but in longhand kind of form, and we were able to analyze their qualitative answers. And we wanted to know what are the biggest issues that chronic pain patients suffer. So definitely the emotion stuff came up. So, feeling angry, feeling sad, feeling frustrated, whatever it might be. But there was this enormous element of the stigma that occurs with healthcare professionals, particularly therapists, that don't believe the extent of their pain. So we knew that that was a really big thing for them. And so topics like that were woven in. And so we did start with that idea of, when did your pain start? Did something happen? So if there was a definitive event, say someone had had a car accident, then things like the movie technique or tell the story were used to process those. But if it was just, I don't know, woke up one day, had this pain, never came, didn't actually come from anywhere, then we would look at what was the stress in life leading into that type of thing, and again, process that. So we were informed by other research that we'd done to come up with those topics, rather than sitting there going, what do I think? Because I don't have any chronic pain. So we go to the source, and the source was the chronic pain patients and just the nature of what they suffer and what they cope with every day. So definitely energy levels and sleep featured in that. That's why we put that in the topics, because it was like, oh yeah, they wake up a lot in the middle of the night, can't get back to sleep because pain interferes in that sleep process. So that's where and our articles that are being published at the moment will absolutely include all of those topic areas, so that if practitioners read them and want to mimic or have a look at any of that, we absolutely share that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Great. So then, punchline, what'd you find? What'd you discover? You spent all this time and energy doing that thing. What do you now know that you didn't know before? Or what do you now have evidence of that you might have known before, but we can now talk about definitively?
Definitely. So if I start with the quantitative, just the self-report measures, we absolutely saw significant changes in all of those mood things, anxiety, depression, physical symptoms, that type of thing, pain, levels of interference and severity, of course, that all showed up, but quality of life. So the quality of life actually has improved in these patients, even over 6 and 12 months. I'm getting emails from our clients in the trial, because I send out, please fill out my 6 and 12-month questionnaire.
Right.
And people are emailing back saying, I forgot I was in your trial because I don't have any pain anymore. I forgot I did that last year.
That's awesomeness.
Save that email, that kind of thing.
Yes.
That was all great. We do know the longevity there. And we know, like I mentioned before, the self-paced version versus the live version, they're getting the same outcomes. So that's really good for us to actually know. But here we go. Big news. The MRI scans, so the functional MRI scans. So I had an independent person who actually is in my faculty, nothing to do with EFT, analyze the data from those scans. So we had 22 patients. That's fairly standard for a functional MRI study. And he was the one that looked at those. He didn't know anything about what we delivered as far as sessions and things like that.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in my office one day and I know he's got the scans and I'm thinking, I wonder whether we'll find anything. Is it going to match what they're telling us? Anyway, I'm not joking. He comes running down the hallway and he knocks on the door and he's like, it worked. And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, we've got significant reductions over that 6 weeks in that pain modulating and catastrophizing area in every single patient, not just the majority of them. And of course, we've got those scans now. And I can tell you, as of Friday this week, that paper has been accepted for publication. So it is about to actually come out. There you go. It's got the scans in it and everything.
Excellent. So what did you do to celebrate?
Well, I had a little jig in my office at the time because I'm like, oh, thank goodness, we know it works. We all know tapping works, but to see the change, and I'm like, my first question, can I have a copy of those scans pre and post? I want to see the difference. So to know that the brain is actually mimicking what we hear as far as, I feel better, or pain doesn't bother me. I mean, to me, that's just the icing on the cake. So yes, Of course, I always have a little jig and kind of celebration in my office, and people don't kind of realize the nerdy work that we do in research, but we try to celebrate.
Yeah, that's awesome. So
Mhm.
then, so now that, other than the fact that, yes, this works, like as a community, as individuals, like what is the non-scientific layman's takeaway from this for those of us online who are tapping for pain, those of us who work with clients and do all of that sort of stuff? What does that particular piece of it look like now?
Yeah, I think, we can at least say, not just at that scientific research, but to clients or working with ourselves, that absolutely having an impact, through the acupoint and the obviously, you know, activity there in the amygdala and, different areas of the brain coming back online, particularly the prefrontal cortex in our study, you absolutely can take away that by doing tapping on something that is, got a psychological impact in it, such as chronic pain, even if that feels physical, you are absolutely changing the neurological connections in your brain. You are not just feeling better at the end of that tapping session, you are rewiring a part of your brain, and within time, that pain will not be part of your daily experience. So I think to have the scans to prove that now, and the vagal efficiency, so I actually didn't touch on that, but we were exploring that just as a kind of,
Yeah.
first step approach. We found that for patients that had a pain level over 5 out of 10, we got a change in vagal efficiency. So the vagus nerve became more efficient if the pain level was higher. We didn't see that in the lower pain levels, but I suspect, sample size and things like
Right.
that will correct down the track. But we absolutely also know that the vagal nerve actually can become more efficient by tapping on things like pain as well. So the takeaway really is your brain changes after you do tapping on pain.
And what does, I know what fuel efficiency gives me, what does vagal efficiency give me?
So vagal efficiency, so the vagus nerve tends to have, that level of baseline activity and efficiency really as it's become better functioning. So if you are operating more from the most progressed, if you like, vagal nerve, which is the ventral vagus, then when something happens to you, or perhaps, you turn funny and you get that kind of shooting pain, how you respond to that, whether you can down regulate that in the brain, has a relationship with the vagus nerve. So if your vagus nerve is more efficient, it means you can come back into a window of tolerance or a regulation fairly quickly. So I always use the example, if someone comes up behind me and scares me, how fast do I come back down? So if I was
Gotcha.
operating from the really historic vagus nerve, which is our dorsal vagus activity, then it might take me hours to actually calm back down. And that really is that deeply evolutionary vagus nerve that was
Right.
there. But if I'm operating from my more, advanced and modern vagus nerve activity, that's my ventral vagus, and it means I kind of go, oh, silly thing,
Right.
come back down, get back to my work. That's the efficiency of your vagal nerve. So what we found for our patients that had higher pain levels was they were able to regulate and down regulate that kind of, pain response really quickly after that 6-week program. So it was our first foray into that, but
Yep.
it's exciting to explore this in further research trials.
Great. So at this point, in addition to this pain stuff, for folks who have not read your book, Science of Tapping, what are some of the other things that we now know from research that you and your team, or I know that you've done a huge amount of analysis of the stuff that's happened over the course of the last 20 years. What are the other things that we're able to say with confidence that evidence is pointing to as we're doing this sort of stuff?
Yeah, we can absolutely say the research is sitting there for trauma and PTSD. So any of those symptomologies in that post-traumatic stress disorder. And on that note, just because I'm putting it out as a collective, the American Psychological Association last November gave my team, so team of a whole bunch of internationals behind me, to evaluate the evidence of EFT for trauma and PTSD, because we have so much,
Mhm.
for inclusion on that evidence-based psychological treatments list of the APA. So that
Oh my gosh.
meta-analysis is almost finished. So I'd just like everyone to collectively put that on their tapping wish list and,
Yeah.
see it, because the moment that kind of comes up, then we have actually got a game changer. So it's been 20 years in the making. That kind of invitation came through, and obviously the approval to say, yeah, there's enough research for trauma and EFT and trauma and PTSD for us to be evaluating that for inclusion on that list. So that's the thing that's actually taken.
And it's interesting you say that. A number of hours ago, when we were talking to David Feinstein, and we were talking about the lessons that he has learned through this entire process, and I said, what's the thing that has been disappointing, and maybe like a study that didn't turn out the way that it was, and his answer was, if people are just so slow up in the uptake. Like we're now to the point where we're getting things that are really, really useful, and we still just can't get that traction. So to be in a circumstance where if you can get something like that done, and that sort of, and as silly as seals of approval are, they're, a reality. And in some cases, they're really, really valuable for us to have bodies that we know are doing good work, to be able to say, yes, this is good. Sometimes it's hard to get them to pay attention, but the fact that they are is really, really good.
We're getting there. So, so there's, the food craving weight loss space, which has been my domain for the last 15 years, the research sitting there. Of course, I can't run that meta-analysis because I'm in all the studies. So someone else can do that. But the evidence is sitting there for weight loss. So food cravings, weight loss, weight maintenance, absolutely got enough sitting there. For anxiety and stress, just in general, we have, lots of meta-analysis, but certainly, hundreds of trials that have measured anxiety and stress with EFT, and absolutely we've got the outcomes there as well. So there's plenty of areas out there. Obviously, like you say, having that tick of approval from certain bodies is just going to legitimize a little bit more, but particularly in the funding space. So, funding is still the biggest issue for us. And even last week, from a disappointment, we did put in for a funding grant to extend our chronic pain trial with functional MRI, and to compare to, a mindfulness-based CBT condition, so that we could start to compare. And we got knocked back. So, that's the life of a researcher, that they're still not ready to even give us, a small pot of money to kind of go, hey, we've already got pilot data. That happens. And I think, that's where that legitimacy and that seal of approval will actually make funding moving forward a little bit easier.
Yeah. So just questions that are showing up in the chat. This has come up a couple of times. Will the self-paced program be made widely available for individuals and facilitators at some point?
At some point, yes. So we just have to finish, obviously, our 12-month follow-up. And but yes, at some point, because we've had the same question, people are like, well, can we have access to that? And look, it's a really good program. So yes, we will within time.
Excellent. So then what's the next big white whale that you are going after? Is it spending more time in the chronic pain space, or is there something else that your team, people who are adjacent to you, what's the other fun stuff that's going on in research right now?
Yeah, cool. Just from our local point of view, yes, we'll continue in that chronic pain space. So we will absolutely still run those gold standard comparison trials. So that's our next big project. I have a passion project happening at the moment with Dr. Lauren Toussaint, who's from Luther College in the US. And we're running a single session EFT for forgiveness trial at the moment. So a bit of a passion project, which is a beautiful trial. I'll actually give you the link there. So you might want to share that, Jean. So it's a single session, and it's about someone that kind of, caused you a hurt. And we're seeing significant results just in a single session of tapping. So that's really cool. Yeah. And look, just to dump her in it, we are preparing for a worldwide trial at the moment with Dr. Carol Look, and we're going to replicate her tapping for eyesight trial that she ran many years ago, and we're going to run it as a proper RCT. So the glasses, yes. So we're going to actually...
That product is actually... After Gary's DVDs, that was the very first digital product I ever purchased, was Carol's eyesight audios and tapping. So it's really, really exciting that you're getting a chance to do stuff beyond trying stuff.
Yeah, so we're preparing that at the moment, and of course, assisting with lots of other things. So running a research trial on all energy psychology with ASEP at the moment. So people might be, and Olfen Ganilla. So I do research with them as well, and we're doing a worldwide stress project with them as well. So there's a lot happening. I'm definitely research intensive.
Well, and it's very funny that you bring up Ulf, because the moment, right as he was saying that, he is saying wonderful, gushing things about you as well.
Look at that. He's a gift. He's a gift.
He truly is. So I'm curious, and if you don't want to share, you don't have to share. I'm curious, why is the forgiveness thing something that is more than just like, hey, I want to contribute to the science, but it's something that you're excited about? Why is that the case?
Yeah, I think, in chatting with Lauren, and Lauren is a researcher, a professor in the forgiveness space, compassion space. Our conversations just sort of, on the side have always been around, isn't it really interesting that when you do tapping with a client in session or groups or whatever it might be, there seems to be a natural byproduct of self-forgiveness, forgiveness of others, self-compassion that emerges without tapping on it. And so our conversations have always been around, hey, wouldn't it be really interesting if we could actually see if that happens by not targeting forgiveness? So the trial doesn't target, let's tap on having to forgive this person that hurt you. But we're looking at it, it's a byproduct. So we've always, and practitioners out there are probably nodding, going, yeah, people often will say, oh, I feel more compassion. I can understand why that person might have done that to me now, but you didn't tap directly on it.
Right.
So that's what the trial actually does, is it actually kind of, just measures it to see, and we're seeing these significant outcomes from a single session of about 45 to 60 minutes of people saying, yeah, that stuff's changed for me now, even though I never tapped on that, I just tapped on the hurt. So yeah, from a passion point of view, I like to have these little ones that are over here that we're about to launch that for a worldwide trial. So we'll certainly let people know in newsletters how they can access it themselves, and it's completely anonymous. So yeah.
And obviously, as that stuff happens, please let me know so I can share the good word with all the people as well, so we can get as many data points as possible. So we have like 7 or 8 minutes left. So now this is your opportunity to say, Gene, the question you really should have asked me was, what's the thing that I missed as we're talking about the chronic pain or anything else that is going on, like, so that we can just continue. Like I said, we can't have enough. I don't think people can have enough information when it comes to being able to share this stuff. So,
Yeah, for sure. And probably, everything we said we were going to talk about, we certainly have. But I want to circle back to what you said about David sharing, probably, the two things that happen in this space about kind of, legitimizing new techniques. One is that translational gap, which takes about 17 to 20 years. And we certainly saw that with EMDR, the eye movement therapy. Right. And we are sitting, I just want to let people know, we are sitting around that 18, 19-year mark with EFT's research. Yeah. So certainly we are there, and we've noticed that with perhaps, the acceptability across different domains worldwide. Certainly we have whole organisations in Australia that approve EFT. We've seen, in the UK, NICE have actually kind of accepted EFT for government funding, pockets like that. So we're seeing the shift. Yeah. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think David might have been talking about was sometimes the uptake of practitioners in the field, that's certainly not our world of EFTers, but other people outside, are just slow to take up the new therapies with the evidence. And I think, tap, for our frustrations. But I think part of that is to encourage, practitioners out there in any health field, allied health, to go to conferences, if you like, or trainings that are outside what you're doing anyway. And certainly, ASAP's an example for us of one of those, but to encourage people to go to those to learn what's actually new out there. So an example being, way back when straight cognitive behavioral therapy was obviously recommended for post-traumatic stress disorder. It is absolutely no longer the gold standard, yet there's lots of practitioners out there, certainly in the traditional spaces, who continue to use straight CBT for trauma. And of course it fails miserably. And of course, it's not the gold standard anymore. Certainly EMDR is the first line that the World Health Organization recommend, and then at least a trauma-focused CBT approach, if not now our combined somatic cognitive therapies. So sometimes I just sort of sit in my corner and rock and kind of go,
It reminds me of the old joke, how many Catholics does it take to change a light bulb?
Oh no, how many?
Change.
Yeah, well, there you go. Grew
and,
up.
and so I like anecdotally, it's exciting that I am seeing in the trainings I'm running more and more licensed folks are showing up. You obviously been interacting with my sister who's now on my team to do this sort of stuff, and like one of her passions is how do we get this into the hands of licensed medical practitioners, so that like, because like it is great that people will seek out a tapping practitioner and someone who is a paraprofessional like myself. And there's a huge population of people who never are, that they're going to stay inside of a very traditional medical system because of benefits and how it's paid for, or whatever that particular, or just trust in knowing like I want to go to an institution because an institution exists, and being in a circumstance where we can start to infiltrate that. And it's one of those things that, you know, I'm sure you're seeing this the way I am, is that like it's not that I'm getting folks from licensed medical professionals. I'm getting younger licensed medical professionals. So folks who are earlier in their career and are to a point where, because I know I am calcified in my approaches, you know, like for people, like it's really easy to go, oh, these people need to learn new stuff. And I need to learn new stuff too. And so like, I can understand how someone is overwhelmed and doesn't do that, but standing from the outside with something as valuable as what you have to offer, it's really frustrating that that is the case. So yes, for all of us to continue to just be thoughtful, deliberate, as my friend Rick Welk says, be vibrational leaders in the way that we bring this sort of stuff into the world.
That's exactly right. So even if it's as simple as read a different book and attend a different kind of, you know, training or conference or a talk you wouldn't normally go to. I mean, maybe we can just take that away and kind of go. I like to remind everyone, because I think a lot of practitioners don't realize this, but we now have a set of clinical guidelines for the treatment of PTSD using EFT tapping, and they are published in an open access journal, and it is step by step. Here is what you should be measuring. Here is how you should be approaching this. Here is how to include the family. And people don't realize we have these clinical guidelines that actually is based on all the research. So absolutely out there, everybody just Google clinical EFT guidelines.
Yeah, and if you could shoot me and my team an email, I will make sure that we get it into the resources for everybody who's participating in all of this, so we can get it to them directly.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesomeness. Well, it is always a delight to spend a little time with you, my friend. I can't wait until we get to be in the same space again, give each other a proper hug, have a drink, and hang out.
Look forward to it.
Thank you for just like being an amazing champion in the space. Like just giving those of us who are not licensed professionals or folks who are not in the research space to just have the access to things so that we can say, yes, like it's not just me. I can actually point to really good, thoughtful, deliberate scientists who are doing really good work. And so you're doing your frustration is real. The pace is slow. The money doesn't come as fast as it does. But I want you to know that even with all of those obstacles, we're so happy that you're doing this amazing, amazing work.
Oh, Jean, thank you. And thank you for hosting particularly this 24 hours. It's just phenomenal to support other people out there in the field and just get that message across. So it's our absolute pleasure to be part of this.
Awesome. Well, I will talk to you soon, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thanks. See you, everybody.